afternoon, everyone. Sorry we couldn't be there with you in person, both myself and my friend Ben de Guzman. Happy, as May said, happy Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I'm honored today as a fellow Asian American to be able to introduce my friend Ben de Guzman. I have known Ben since about 1999. I was trying to remember when and where we met, but both of us probably don't want to share that. We did meet through some mutual friends in the DC LGBTQ community, however. Ben is the son of Filipino immigrants and was born and raised in New Jersey. He first moved to the district back in 1997, as did I, and is a proud resident of Ward 1. He currently serves as the director of the DC Mayor's Office on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs, or as we call it, MOAPIA. He has been a leading voice at the local and national levels on issues of racial equity, immigrants' rights, veterans affairs, and LGBT justice for more than 2 decades. He comes to MOAPIA from the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs, where he served as the community outreach specialist. Briefly, Ben has authored articles and op-eds that have appeared in mainstream and special interest media, anthologies, and academic publications, including the Encyclopedia of Asian American Issues Today. In October 2019, he received one of the 20 Outstanding Filipino American Awards for LGBT Advocacy. Ben will be sharing with the club a bit more about the MOAPIA office, some AAPI DC history, and some facts and figures about AAPIs. Again, we both apologize for not being there with you in person. Please give Ben a warm welcome.
Thank you for having me here. As Jennifer said, my name is Ben de Guzman, and I'm proud to serve Mayor Muriel Bowser in her cabinet as the director of the Mayor's Office on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs. I did want to acknowledge the other members of Mayor Bowser's cabinet who are also Asian American and Pacific Islander, whether it's David Doe, who was my predecessor and is at the Department of For-Hire Vehicles, or Nin Kang, who is the director of the Office of Human Rights, Brian Hum, who's the interim director of the Office of Policy and Legislative Affairs, Matt McCullough, who is the director of the Office of Disability Rights, Anna Smith, who is the head of the Workforce Investment Council, and Laura Newland, who is the head of the Department of Aging and Community Living. So I'm really proud to serve, again, in Mayor Bowser's cabinet, along with these fellow Asian Americans who really cut across a broad swath of policy areas and facets of public life here in the city. And so I think it really speaks to the diversity of the mayor's cabinet, but also the diversity of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. I'm Filipino, as has been mentioned. I'm the first Filipino actually to serve in this capacity at MOAPIA. Nin Kang is Burmese American. Matt McCullough is Filipino, but was adopted by white parents and came to DC through that route. And so, you know, we've taken many paths to our current location here in terms of providing public service on behalf of the mayor. But again, on her behalf, I provide greetings for you. And again, thank you for allowing me to come and talk to you about Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So just to give you a little bit of a roadmap of what I plan to do in the next, hopefully, shorter than 20 minutes, is talk to you a little bit about our office, talk to you about Heritage Month itself, sort of why we're here, the reason for the season, talk not nearly as much as I would like to about AAPI history in Washington, DC, a little bit about sort of the facts and figures about our community here, and then a little bit about kind of Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage more broadly speaking. Some of the things that we only get to talk about during API Heritage Month. And really it's an opportunity for me to brag about the community and about the impact that we've had here in the district. So I'll close with just some final thoughts about how we can better serve our communities who are AAPI and how we can better engage with them and invite them to the different things that we are engaged in, whether it's as Rotarians, whether it's as public servants. And then I do want to leave a lot of time for questions and answers. The first thing that I wanted to do actually to kind of set the stage is share with you a video that we were able to produce at MOAPIA. And it really talks about, again, as I mentioned before, the different paths that we've taken to DC. As Mayor Bowser has said, whether you've been here for 5 days or 5 generations, DC is a place that welcomes everybody. Asians and Pacific Islanders represent about 5% of the population here in the district. And so they cut across different nationalities, different immigration statuses, different generations. And so kind of wherever you are in the district, you are never too far away from someone in the Asian American and Pacific Islander community probably doing something really interesting.
My name is Jeannie Bauman, and I teach Dunya. It's a Bollywood workout class. I love that we get people who've been dancing their whole life, and then we also have folks who, just want to come in and get a good workout, and they want to dance and have a good time. And so we have folks from all ages, all backgrounds, and I love that there's this sort of dance and music that can bring people together, just having fun and building a community. The AAPI community have come to the district from places far and wide.
My name is Alvina, and I grew up in Colorado.
My name is Daniel Phoenix Singh. We left India because opportunities were slim there, and a lot of my friends were moving into DC, and it felt like the right place to be.
In 2010, I met Alvina in Hawaii, and I decided that, hey, I have an opportunity at work to move to the DC area and to be with her, so I did.
So you chased a girl?
I did.
I want us to be that place that surprises you. That like, oh, this is a place where I can lay down roots.
I'm a queer South Asian, and it was really a place where I found my family. It really gave me a sense of home. This is Arman Phoenix Leela Singh. He's my son, and his sister is Meherunisa Violet Madhvi Singh. They're twins. They're 5 months old.
This is our home. It's a great place to live. All of our friends are here. It's such a diverse neighborhood, diverse city. Why would we move anywhere else?
Yeah.
People in my community are righteous, strong-willed, and has lots of affection.
I think that there's some unexpected aura or feeling that you get in DC where you feel like you should be engaged in one way or another.
My name is Steve Park. I am the founder and executive director of Little Lights Urban Ministries, and we're a nonprofit organization that serves public housing students and families in Washington, D.C.
Steve looks very different from the people that he serves.
Once in a blue moon, I do get asked, like, are you here delivering the Chinese food, right? I'm like, no, I'm not. We do a lot of after-school tutoring, a lot of one-to-one tutoring in reading and math. We have a one-to-one mentoring program. We have a kids choir. We have Family Center for adults to get access to jobs and employment, as well as a landscaping social enterprise. So there are a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of programs at Little Lights. But I think what brings it all together is compassion. Great things about being around a long time and being in the same community for a long time is you do get to watch kids in your program grow up.
I have been involved with Little Lights for over 20 years, so longer than I can remember. Steve used to come pick us up in a van at Potomac Gardens and take us to church on Sundays. We got meals like food and just the chance to just be a kid without having to worry about anything else.
These kids are beautiful. These kids have so much potential. but they need support. They need that extra help.
And I think that's what kept me coming back. It definitely set an example of what service means. And now I'm a program coordinator here at Little Lights.
You know, there's the narrative that we are the Korean owners of the bodega, but the population here is really engaged in our communities.
I think for immigrants, there's always trying to find the balance of like where you came from or where you were born, and then being present where you are and loving and where you're raising your kids.
It means so much to me that I got a tattoo representing the DC flag, Colorado, where I'm from, and Hawaii, where I lived and met Jeff.
I just love DC. There's a lot of great things here, so yeah, this is definitely home.
So a little bit about our office. Again, the Mayor's Office on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs has been around. We're actually getting ready to celebrate our 35th anniversary this year. So we were founded in the 80s. And our, I always talk about our office. You know, our mission is officially to improve the quality of life for District Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders through advocacy and engagement. We advise the mayor, the council, and district agencies on the views, needs, and concerns of the API community. The way I think that works itself out is in two ways. On one hand, we represent the mayor to the API community. So making sure that we're out there physically, personally engaging the community, making sure they know the latest in terms of the mayor's initiatives, city government policies, and so forth, which has been especially important during the pandemic, right? At the same time, we're an advocate for the community to city government. So we help our residents navigate the bureaucracies, making sure that that Korean bodega owner is going to be able to get their, city licensing and contracts correct, making sure that the senior who's living in subsidized housing at the Wallach House is able to get their benefits. A lot of this stuff is hard enough if you are a speaker of English, if you are a citizen. So we make sure that especially our most vulnerable populations, people who have different immigration statuses, people who don't speak English, our seniors, that they're able to navigate the system and that they have just as much access to the government resources and services as anybody else. I wanted to talk a little bit about Heritage Month. So, I always appreciate the different ways in which we've created opportunities to lift up different voices, different communities. Black History Month is in February. We've done events in Women's Month in March. And May is actually also Older American Month. And so, we did an event earlier this month with Director Newland, who is one of our Asian Americans in the cabinet, to celebrate Older Americans Month. But for us, API Heritage Month began as the brainchild of folks who were in the Congress, whose political shoulders we stand on, like Spark Matsunaga, Norm Mineta, and folks like that in 1977 with just a week. So we had Asian American History Week. And then from there, it evolved to a month through the Carter administration. And then in 1992, it became an established federally recognized month. So in 1992, we began Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And so it's something that we've been able to recognize nationally since. So this year, API Heritage Month as is recognized by President Biden and the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, the theme that they are observing for this month is Building Legacy Together, Our Community's Journey of Strength and Resilience. Just a little bit about the history. Because the history has yet to be written, I think. I think a really good Pan-Asian, multi-ethnic history of our communities here in Washington, D.C., I think has yet to be written. So hopefully, you know, some of the people that we're working with now, some of the people who are making history now, or the people that we will pass the torch on to will be the ones to write that history. But I did want to kind of mention two particular communities that have taken specific steps to document our history here in Washington, D.C. One is you've, you know, you're gonna hopefully, those of you who will talk to David and the Chinese American Museum, they work hand in hand with other groups that are in Chinatown. They're just on 16th Street, just above Chinatown. But you've got organizations like the 1882 Foundation that really do a great job in preserving the history of Chinese Americans, and especially in Chinatown, so that regardless of the demographic flow, that Chinatown continues to be a legacy kind of ancestral home for the Chinese American community of DC and of the area, but also in some ways it's a legacy home for our API community broadly written. And then just another, you know, community, one that I'm familiar with, the Filipino American community, at the risk of betraying a family connection, a cousin of mine by marriage, Rita Kakas, her family foundation has done a lot of historical work here in Washington, D.C. They've published a book through Arcadia Publishing called Filipinos in Washington, D.C. It's kind of a neat photo coffee table book if you want to check it out. But they've documented things like the Manila House, which is nationally, federally recognized as a historical location on 22nd and K Streets downtown. That is a home to a lot of Filipinos that came here in the early part of the 20th century, especially right after the Philippine-American War, where the US really began its colonial project after it took over the Philippines and turned it into a colonial property of the US. So, but again, each community has its own rich history, and I would do an injustice to those histories if I were to spend any time sharing them with you here. But I encourage you to kind of Google or contact my office, and we can help unearth some of those other histories as well. Just a little bit about facts and figures. There's a you know, I have all this information, you know, in a slide form. We actually haven't put it in a demographic infographic chart yet in terms of some of the newer data that have come out. But, you know, in the video, we talked about the 5% population that the API community has in DC. The most current numbers that we have, that number has ticked up to like 6.9%. So the population is about 46,000. 16% of district residents speak a language other than English, and many of them are Asian American and Pacific Islander. And we know that 23% of the API population here in DC have limited English proficiency. So, you know, it is large populations of the immigrant communities in DC are Asian American. So, you know, so that is a particular facet of our community that my office makes sure that it's able to serve and engage.
Thank you for sharing those stats. And that kind of ties in with the question I have, and then we'll open it also to our online attendees for a question. So we all know Chinatown. As a native Washingtonian, that was the obvious place with the largest concentration of Asian Pacific Islanders. Now, that has kind of attenuated somewhat. There aren't very many Chinese left in Chinatown, unfortunately, as we've read in the Washington Post. I was wondering, are there any other concentrations of Asians or Pacific Islanders, or are they just generally dispersed out there with everybody else?
You know, the community, you know, is obviously in all 8 wards. You know, the largest pockets of which are in places like Ward 2, which is where Chinatown is. Ward 6 and Ward 1 also have larger populations, as does Ward 3. You know, in terms of ethnic enclaves, you know, you've got Chinatown, actually. I did want to mention, you know, so it's more like certain particular spots in the district. So whether it's the Wallach House or another couple of properties, Gibson Plaza in Ward 6 off of 7th Street, Museum Square, which is on Massachusetts and like 4th. Those are sort of subsidized housing that are home to larger pockets of primarily Chinese American and Vietnamese American seniors and immigrant families. So there's also kind of you know, one of the apartment buildings up on 16th Street, right before the Rock Creek Parkway, right above the big bridge that crosses Rock Creek. There's a sort of mythical home of the Southeast Asian community, in the sense that there's an apartment building that, for whatever, you know, demographic and interpersonal reasons, became home to a lot of Southeast Asian folks that came to DC, whether it was to do political work or nonprofit work. And just by word of mouth, that building kind of just was home to a lot of those folks. So you have individual stories like that, but I think in a larger kind of ethnic enclave sense, beyond Chinatown, there isn't really kind of an enclave in that sense. But again, I think we continue to unearth these stories, and I love sharing them.
Which is a little different from, say, San Francisco, where I lived at one time, where about 40% of the city is Asian Pacific Islander, and a lot of Filipinos. And just to close things, we've run out of time. We do have twin club relations with the Manila Rotary Club and also with the Tokyo Rotary Club. So we as a club have an ongoing relationship. Seoul and Taipei, thank you.
Can I just answer a very quick question that was in the chat about the Pacific Island and Pacific Basin countries? Because I think they're a very important part of our constituency, and often Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month neglects to really give the Pacific Islander part of our nomenclature its due. And so, especially in a city like DC that is fighting for statehood, you know, a lot of the Pacific Islander jurisdictions that are ostensibly part of the American polity, you know, folks come here from Guam or American Samoa, where they have limited representation in the political government, only to come to DC and they're still second-class citizens because we don't have statehood, at the risk of making that a political issue. But it does speak to the reality that our office is able to resonate with a lot of different folks in the Asian and Pacific Islander community because of the unique position that DC holds as our nation's capital. So I just wanted to, there's much more to say to that question from Dr. Hancock, but I did want to mention that because our Pacific Islander folks are, so thank you.
Well, thank you for your service, and that's to that community and to all of us in Washington, D.C. who benefit from that diversity. So thank you again. And our way of thanking our speakers for joining us is that we will plant a tree in your honor. We have a tradition of doing this. We plant a tree in the honor of each of our speakers in partnership with the National Park Service. We've been doing it for 30 years, and we'll be planting a tree in your honor. So thanks again for being our guest speaker today, and we'll hope to see you in person sometime. Come and join us.
Yes, thank you.